Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, May 18th, 2023, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, May 4th, 2023, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of Thursday, May 4th, 2023.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 9.
I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 through 5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move we approve the notices of proceedings associated with agenda items 6 through 9.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that's it, right? Yep.
That's
Okay.
it.
All right, that brings us to agenda item 10. Agenda item 10 is docket number 4190-AF-101. So this particular docket concerns a request filed by North Central Power Company, and they submitted an application for approval of deferral accounting treatment for storm damage and repair costs. The applicant identified that transmission and distribution lines and equipment were damaged from a storm that occurred on December 14th and requested permission to defer the damage and the repair costs. So traditionally, when we talk about deferrals, we rely on our staff accounting policy statement of position, or SOP 94-01. And that SOP is very clearly lays out the criteria that deferral accounting could be utilized. The first is that the cost has to be outside of the utility's control. The second factor is whether the cost is unusual and infrequently occurring. The third criteria is whether the amount, if recognized in the year of expenditure, would cause the utility serious financial harm or significantly distort the current year's income. And finally, whether the immediate recognition of the expenditure would have a significant impact on ratepayers. Clearly, the costs that are at issue meet the criteria under SOP 94-01. What's different about this one is the timing. So the storm that hit this part of the state began on December 14th, and it was a significant storm event, and the utility had to request mutual aid assistance from other utilities, and they didn't file their request for deferral until January 17th. Now that goes against longstanding commission practice, which is that a request for deferral needs to be filed in the same year that those costs have been incurred. And that is not tied to a specific uniform systems of account regulation or rule. That's not in code, but that has been our longstanding practice here at the commission. And so because of that, of the total amount, nearly all of it was for damages and repair costs that were incurred in 2022, but we didn't receive the filing until 2023. I am a stickler for following the rules, but I also try to be pragmatic and understand that real life occurs. And because this isn't a statutory requirement, this is a long-standing internal practice, I think that it is reasonable to approve their deferral request. They were busy. They were busy trying to get their customers reconnected, and it took a lot. And us granting the deferral doesn't necessarily mean that we will allow recovery of those costs. That's up to a later point in time when we actually go and review the prudency of the costs. And so the storm started on December 14th. They made their filing on January 17th. I feel comfortable allowing it in this instance, and I'm wondering, does it make sense for us to have a discussion about our longstanding practice and perhaps provide guidance to utilities that if expenses occur in the last 2 weeks of the year, that they'd be given some sort of grace period. Because again, it's important that we adhere to our policies and procedures. It's also important that we understand and we are flexible. And for a utility of this size, there's no doubt that recognizing that expense would cause financial harm. So for this one, I'm at alternative 1. I would approve their request as filed, and I would not apply carrying costs. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, thank you. I landed in the same spot, and I thought the comments provided by the utility were basically exactly what I was thinking before those comments were filed. I mean, the winter conditions were of a nature where you had rain turning to freezing rain, turning to super heavy snow. I mean, we know what that looks like, and that looks like a lot of trees down, a lot of lines down, and that's exactly what happened here. And the timing of this is, if this would have happened January 1st, you know, I think you're right. I mean, then they could have filed a deferral almost 12 months later and still counted it in 2023. Right. Instead, they filed it within like 33 days, which to me is eminently pragmatic for us to give that deferral. I'm just looking. So I was at the position on the second issue of applying carrying costs at short-term debt. So that's where I was at on the second issue. Do you want to entertain more broadly that idea of what to do with end-of-year storms? I mean, do we want to talk about that now, or do we need to talk about that at another time?
Sure.
You know, it's
we
almost.
can talk about it. Let's hear where
Yeah.
Commissioner Strand is, and then we
Yeah.
can circle back.
Sounds good.
Thank you. I'm also at alternative 1. I was compelled by the utilities comments, and I can foresee the situation where they were scrambling to get people back connected, and then I believe they probably filed this as soon as they had their
Yeah.
stuff together in mid-January. And I'm also supportive of a discussion about maybe some flexibility about the end of the year. And again, I'm supportive of the longstanding practice, but I think applying that kind of pragmatic real-world lens here makes a lot of sense. And then carrying costs, I was originally at alternative 1 as well, as where Commissioner Huebner is, but I'm open to a discussion about that as well.
Okay, so on the timing, you know, and we're not coming up with a rule. This is just internal guidance that would be utilized for expenses that occur at the end of the year. I mean, I think if we have staff make it known to the utilities that if you're going to be filing a request for year-end expenses and you're seeking deferral, that should be within the first, I would say, the first 45 days of the following calendar year. I mean, I think that gets to the issue of what happens if the storm occurred on December 31st.
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So did you have thoughts in terms of
I was thinking the same thing.
45
days.
Yeah.
Yep.
good?
And maybe just to clarify, as opposed to end-of-year expenses, because we don't
Oh,
want
right,
them
right.
waiting.
Right.
Something that happened in February of 2023, waiting the 45 days. So for events happening in December?
December. I would say only December, because you don't want it to creep then, to your point, yeah.
I think that's fair.
So,
100%.
okay. So for expenses incurred in December, they must be filed, if they're going to seek deferral, right? I mean,
Yep.
this is only if they're seeking deferral. It's got to be then filed within 45 days of the following calendar year. And then for carrying costs, so I'm interested in what both of your thoughts are on carrying costs. So I'll do my little, 30-second primer on deferrals and carrying costs. So in a deferral, in a case like this, where the utility is requesting to defer its costs out into the future, the way I've always looked at that is they're creating a regulatory asset. And that asset is essentially an IOU from customers, right? Pending our prudency review. So if you think about it in terms of now there's an IOU that customers may be liable for if we, at the conclusion of our rate review, decide that IOU, the costs contained in that IOU were prudently incurred and should be recovered. carrying costs, you're adding additional dollars to that IOU. So you're actually making the customer's bill, if it comes due, it's more. Certainly in cases when they don't even ask for it, I don't think it's appropriate that we add to that IOU. Now, if they're creating a regulatory liability, that's the flip, that's the reverse, where that's an IOU from the company to customers, right? I could make an argument that perhaps carry costs are reasonable in that particular circumstance. But when we're talking about an IOU that may eventually have to be paid for by the customers, and the utility hasn't asked for or demonstrated why carrying costs would be prudent, I don't think it's appropriate to add them. So I'd be interested.
I think you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where they've paid the bill, so in the flip side, if they owe this about $400,000, but they're gonna pay that in 2 years, you would expect that, okay, maybe they need to get interest because, I think that you're thinking about it correctly. So I don't know. Where's Jackie? Deborah's here.
Where's Deborah? There's Deborah.
So, yes.
They've
Did I
paid
get
the
it? I got it
bill.
right. Yeah.
So, yeah, what Chair Bach is bringing up as the concern is a way you could think of it and matches kind of that timing of with carrying costs, if you would apply it, in this case, they would have already have paid the bill, so they would be getting interest equivalent on it if you approve carrying costs, even though they didn't have that outstanding costs.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Okay. Does that clarify it, Commissioner Huebner?
It does. Yep. And I think the record shows that they have paid these expenses.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah. So I'll join you.
Yeah, okay.
I'm persuaded by your reasoning, so I will join you there as well.
Okay, all right, so all three. All right, okay. We need a motion.
I'll make a motion in that case. So in docket 4190 AF 101, I move that we approve the applicant's deferral request as filed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the next docket is agenda item number 12, docket 6680-AF-104. Nope, just kidding. Yes, it is. No,
Nope.
no. We're on 11.
Yep.
Wow, I checked it off too quickly. Okay, agenda item 11 is docket 4280-AF-102. Same storm, different utility. So this request is from Northwestern Wisconsin Electric Company. And in this case, they incurred $220,000 worth of costs related to downed power lines and damaged equipment. They too had put out a call for mutual aid. They received it from the Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association. They also had to engage a vegetation contractor to assist with clearing the trees. In this particular case, again, same storm, but this filing came in February 1st. And so consistent with our discussion in the last one, I would approve it as filed and I would not apply carrying costs.
Yep,
Commissioner Huebner?
same discussion. I'm in the same spot.
Commissioner
I am
Stern?
too.
Okay, in docket 4280 AF 102, I move we approve the applicant's deferral request as filed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we're on agenda item 12, which is docket 6680-AF-100. This is another request for deferral, but this is different. So this is a request from Wisconsin Power and Light Company to defer the retail portion of their incremental pre-certification costs, so that's decision item 1, and to begin accruing allowance for funds used during construction, or AFUDC, on pre-construction costs. And both of those buckets of dollars are related to the development of their battery and energy storage system, that they have a pending application to construct that battery energy storage system at their Edgewater generating station. They estimate that their total incremental pre-certification and pre-construction costs will be $2.5 million through 2024. They are requesting to defer 1.4 million of that. And they are seeking carrying costs at the short-term debt rate. And they are also seeking to begin accruing AFUDC on their pre-construction costs to be incurred effective with the date of the commission's final decision in this docket. So again, two different buckets of dollars. And they cited in their application and in their comments to the memo different situations where the commission has approved the deferral of the pre-certification costs. I know that Commissioner Huebner dissented. I went back and I read those, our discussion of those particular dockets. So with pre-certification costs, even though I voted for it in the past, I'm going to actually vote to deny it. I think when I voted to approve it the last time, and I think I remember saying this, that it was such a small amount of money. But now I feel that perhaps that's been misinterpreted as that's kind of an open door to come in and start seeking deferral of these costs. And I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that these particular pre-certification costs, in order for us to stay consistent with the uniform system of accounts, that it's not proper. And quite frankly, this is the cost of doing business. And that cost is reflected in the return that utilities receive. And so as it relates to the pre-certification costs, I'm going to vote to not allow it, which is alternative 2. And then that makes my decision on carrying costs moot. And then we can go to pre-construction costs, which is a different analysis. Commissioner Huebner?
Thank you. I'm in the same spot. And I just, on page 4 of our memo, has the 4 SOP statements that you read in the last one, and I just marked no, 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 no for this. You know, it's not outside of their control because they're obviously in control. It's no longer unusual or infrequent because we're getting these all the time.
Right.
And it's only $500,000 for a utility of this size, different than the ones we just talked about, where they have, you know, a few hundred to thousands of customers. This is a utility with multiple hundreds of thousands of customers. And so I just don't think that this falls. And so I'm in the same spot on either at Alt 2 on carrying costs or just we don't have to make an answer because
Okay.
I would be at Alt 2 on that, so.
Okay. Commissioner Strand?
I'm in the exact same spot, heat of agreement for all the reasons you guys mentioned.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so then there's pre-construction costs. So this is, before they are allowed to put shovels in the ground, they have to receive a permit from us, whether that's a CA or a CPCN. But the utility will incur certain expenses, and they are asking to record those expenses as construction work in progress, which is QUIP, and to begin accruing AFUDC. This is standard practice. It's not controversial. It's not, at least in my mind, it's consistent with the way we treat pre-construction costs. So for this particular bucket of dollars, I'm at alternative 1. I would authorize the applicant to record those in QUIP and accrue AFUDC on 100% of the pre-construction costs. Commissioner Huebner.
Yeah, this one was a close call for me because the $2 million in this case is so low. And some of the ones we've had in the past, it's been higher than that. I think it was $4 million in the most recent one, and I was on the edge about that. Again, for this larger utility, So I'd like to see where Commissioner Strand's at. I was coming in being at Alt 2 for this one, that really the dollar amount was so low. The other thing that's been different, some of the ones in the past, there was tax credit things going on where they had to procure equipment by a certain date.
Right.
And so we wanted to get that going so they could lock those tax credits in. And now, that has changed with federal policy now, setting those tax credits out for multiple years. So I just felt like this was iffy, but curious to see where Commissioner Strand's at
Okay,
on that.
Commissioner Strand.
This one was a close call for me as well. I think I'm with Commissioner Hebner. I just don't think the cost amounts associated with this request rise to the level of material, especially for a utility of this size. And I agree with the reasoning, but to me, it didn't really check any of the criteria boxes either. And I know what you said about the cost of doing business. I feel like this is the cost of doing business as well.
Yeah.
So I think I'm at alternative 2 for this one.
Okay, all right. So then we don't need to talk about timing.
Right?
Right. Well, I have to write a dissent, do I? No. Yeah, I'm going to stay where I am.
Okay. Do we need a motion?
Yes, to the front.
Okay. So in docket 6680 AF 104, I move that we do not authorize either the pre-certification or the pre-construction cost deferral.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay. Okay. All right.
Aye on the first one, nay on the second one. They got lumped together.
Oh, yes. Okay. I agree to deny the pre-cert costs. I would have allowed the deferral of the pre-construction costs.
So noted.
Got it. Okay. All right. This is why everybody tuned in to YouTube today. Agenda item 13. Docket 5-BF-2023. Okay, it's another exciting day in Wisconsin. This is the 10th year that the commission will be discussing and hopefully awarding dollars under our state broadband expansion grant program. That program is authorized under Wisconsin statute, specifically section 196.504. And the purpose of this program is to encourage the deployment of broadband service in underserved and unserved areas of our state. We had $14.1 million available for this round. We can talk about it a little later, that there are additional dollars that went unused from prior funds that we could, it is within our discretion and it is well within the statutes for us to use those dollars as well. And so we can talk about that. But for this round, we received 74 applications seeking $73 million. So as we've seen over the years, the need continues to be there. And even with an influx of federal dollars available for the deployment of broadband infrastructure, the need and the applications that were submitted demonstrates, to me at least, that our state program is still incredibly necessary to fill the gaps in order to get broadband internet reliably and affordably to all parts of our state. So we always offer a comment period where we receive objections to proposals. That objection period is then followed by an opportunity for the applicant to respond to any objections raised. In this particular cycle, we received 17 objections to proposed projects from 4 different parties. We then received 10 responses to those objections, and the responses included 3 requests to withdraw and 3 requests to revise the original application. We had a 3-member screening panel. That panel reviewed each application for eligibility and for merit, and I'd like to recognize the members of that screening panel. They are all members of commission staff: Robbie Daly, Pete Yan, and Dennis Kalila. So they all of this information is publicly available. It is always publicly available. I would encourage potential applicants or potential customers of applicants, or anybody who's interested, to go to the PSC website. There are myriad of maps available in any which way you would like to see the information presented. Our broadband office does an incredible job of making that information available, and the objections and the responses are online as well. And so I would encourage people to go ahead and take a look at all of that information. So our decision is governed by the statutory eligibility requirements for our state broadband program. The applicant must be a for-profit or non-for-profit organization, a telecommunications utility, or a political subdivision partnering with an eligible private party. Staff found that 73 of the 74 applications were from eligible entities. One applicant was an individual citizen, and because of the statute, that applicant was ineligible. In order to be eligible for a grant, the application must propose to construct broadband infrastructure in an area of the state that this commission has designated as underserved. Under Wisconsin statute, an underserved area is one that is served by fewer than 2 broadband service providers. However, current Wisconsin statute does not prescribe the speed or technologies necessary to meet the definition of broadband. So this commission adopts the same speed standard as is designated by the FCC. So for the purpose of this grant round, an underserved area is defined as any area that is served by fewer than 2 providers providing wireline or fixed wireless service at a minimum speed of 25 meg download and 3 meg upload. Because we understand that mapping is imprecise, we have permitted an area to be designated as underserved if an applicant demonstrates that the locations it proposes to serve lack providers. So not all times does the mapping data line up with reality in terms of the providers that are able to provide the service. So all of the applications that we received were reviewed to determine whether the application proposed to build broadband in an eligible project area. I think that this is important to note, and it's in our memo. Again, this is all publicly available. But staff note that it's not uncommon for projects to have some portion of locations already served by at least 2 providers, but recognize that this is occasionally necessary in order to reach the typically more remote and harder to access underserved and unserved locations. So when you look at the map of where broadband infrastructure is, it's tempting to think that the lines and the boundaries are perfect and precise, but they are not. They're the opposite. And so I think it's really important when we talk about this and when we look at eligibility that we recognize that there may be areas that appear to have a bit of overlap, but that's because you have to travel that same route to get to the people on the other side who are either unserved or underserved. So staff went through and they reviewed the projects, they scored them, they gave us a merit order. That's the screening panel's recommendation. We have all of the applicant information. All of the links are live and available to anybody who would like to go and review those. In this particular case, we saw a pretty high percentage of proposed match from the applicants. The majority for this cycle had a match percentage of 50% or better. I will reiterate that the list of applications, the merit order, all of that is advisory. At the end of the day, the 3 of us have to decide by at least 2 votes who ultimately will receive the funding. So there are a couple of decision points. I went through, and I'm always impressed at the level of thoroughness, not just in our staff's review, but in the applications themselves. And I want to give kudos to the internet service providers, because it's a big job. It's a very big job, and they are showing to be capable partners, especially as it comes to our state broadband expansion grant program. So I am not going to propose any changes. I was comfortable with attachment 1, which identified 20 projects that ranked the highest. And then I am inclined to utilize unused funds from prior rounds to award 4 additional projects. And in our memo, those projects that I would support are referred to as sub-alternative B. So I'm at Alt 1, and I would then award the grants to the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin, Norvado's Town of Eileen, Next Gen Broadband Town of Forest, and Norvado's Town of Poplar. Commissioner Huebner.
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, kudos to the applicants, as you said. Thank you for bringing these projects in. I will also note that these projects were right-sized for the amount of money that we had. So in this particular instance, it was about that $74 million. In past rounds, we've had multiple hundreds of millions of dollars, and so I want to be sure that the listeners and everyone knows the need is far greater than the 77 or 74 million proposed here, but these projects were sized knowing that there was 14-something million dollars available. And if you come in asking for $10 million of that pot, you know, as we've awarded in the past, you know, that was going to be less competitive given our desire to really spread the dollars and spread the money, because we know the needs are all throughout the state. I landed in the same spot as you, Chair. I thought that the sort of the above the line, the original $14+ million were the cream of the crop in this round. And looking at the 3 sub-alternatives that we had in front of us, I landed in the same spot, that the 4 identified in sub-alternative B. Number 1, it gets grants to 4 counties that we hadn't awarded grants above this line. So it continues to spread the dollars out throughout the geographies that we know need them. And then it also had a decent chunk of unserved, as compared to C, didn't have as many of the unserved, sub-alternative C, that is. So I'm in the same spot.
Great. Commissioner Strand.
I echo the comments. I think the staff did an excellent job with all this and with Internet for All sessions that are ongoing. I'm enjoying those very much. And to the applicants as well. So I'm supportive of the, top 20 for the 14.1 million that's available. I went back and forth between sub-alternative B and C, but I'm very comfortable with B. I think no matter what, there are going to be these unserved locations where the build-out is expensive, and so there's quote-unquote relatively low value, but it's necessary, and we're gonna reach these people eventually, so let's do it with what we have. So I'm comfortable with sub-alternative B, those extra 4 projects as well.
Okay, great. And I'll just, I would also like to compliment staff. This is the first time that we've seen it presented as sort of Alt 1B, Alt 1C, and grouping the projects and sort of explaining, well, these are higher cost but harder to reach. I think for me, I found that to be extraordinarily helpful. I do also appreciate the spreadsheet that we are able to go in and sort of tweak it to our liking. But I found the way that these alternatives were presented to us was really, really helpful. So, all right.
Great. In docket 5, BF 2023, I move that we award grants consistent with our discussion today.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that brings us to the next 2 items, which will be discussed while in closed session. So we are going to recess our open meeting, go into closed session, and we're going to discuss litigation matters with our legal counsel.
Okay, I move that we recess the open meeting, go into closed session under Wisconsin statutes 19.85 1G to discuss the litigation matters identified in items 14 and 15.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, while we were in closed, we provided direction to legal counsel about the litigation matters noted on our agenda. So we have concluded our official business for today. The next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 1st, 2023 at 10:30 a.m.
I move we stand adjourned until Thursday, June 1st.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.